Welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate. Today, my guest is an artist, designer, writer, and hand lettering specialist whose work celebrates the beauty of the human hand in a world increasingly dominated by automation. Known online as DanDrawnWords, his lettering intentionally preserves pencil lines, guidelines, and imperfections as proof that a real person made it. My guest, the man himself, Dan Lee. Dan, how are you doing, sir?
Doing so well. Justin, how are you?
It's going to be great, man. I'm telling you, people don't even know how many takes we just hit right now to get this intro, but I'm going to leave this in here because it's funny. We hit it a few times, but
Yes, sir.
so Dan, let's talk about it. Let's start from the beginning. You described yourself as a classic art kid growing up making comics, crafts, and drawings. What did creativity give you as a kid that nothing else could?
That's such a good question, man. I was thinking about this, and I think the number one thing is the escape. Like I was never bored as a kid, and it's not that I had a particular reason that I might be more bored than the average kid, but I guess I tapped into something early on where I realized that I would never be bored if I was capable of making stuff all the time. And so the escape from everyday life in between times between playing and doing other stuff, it was just so easy to be like, well, don't want to go to the worlds in my head. I don't want to, just pass the time and do something that I think is fun. And I also wonder if it was like a little bit of an early power trip. Like as a kid realizing, oh yeah, you get to create something. And maybe I observed when I was little, it's like kind of the communicative power or the persuasive or the attractive power of something that looks really cool. And it probably tapped something in me that was like, well, if I can do that, then I get to wield some of that magic too. So between those, I think like the escape and the power narratives, like as a kid, I feel like that's what drove it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Are you a Lego guy versus a Hot Wheels guy?
Dude, Lego guy for sure. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking back. Yeah, and because you could break out of the mold
Mhm.
of whatever they had.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll be like, I can't, I'm 5. How am I supposed to understand these directions? It's like,
Right. I mean, you do what I want to do.
yeah. So let me ask you this one. DC or Marvel for your
Nah,
comics?
that's tough, dude. I feel like because the MCU was happening right when I was hitting like college and they were nailing this whole like cinematic universe concept in a way that DC seemed to be flailing at, my allegiance definitely fell into Marvel. But I think if I think back growing up, I was definitely reading more Superman, Batman, actual comics. So it's probably
Okay.
like a phase and era sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I was just wondering about that. Whenever I see someone that is a creative and they like to tinker, they are craftsmen, they like to put stuff together. I'm like, Legos or car, like Hot Wheels. Like where was your
Yeah.
childhood? That'll tell me a lot.
Constructing or collecting kind of.
Right. There it is. Yes. So there's a little story I want to tap into real quick. There's a story about how your teacher called you a little printer because of your penmanship. Looking back now, do you think lettering was always quietly just showing up in your life? Or do you think you kind of, like most designers do, we suppress it until we can't get the noise out of our head?
I like how you framed that. Yeah. I think the former, like it just was constantly there because, the story in question when I was in first grade, yeah, my teacher told my parents that I was a little printer. They told me about it. I thought it was hilarious that there was any other way to do it because whenever it came to the penmanship part, school, I just felt like we were drawing. Like it was an
Hmm.
excuse to draw. And so I wanted to draw the letters as nicely as possible because that brought me so much joy in that moment. And so for that reason, I think it was having that perspective of, oh yeah, words are art. That was probably just latently in me from then. And maybe like a gift of a perspective that ended up unintentionally informing like the rest of my life.
So let me ask you this. How important was the environment you were in that shaped your approach to creativity? Because I hear how your parents kind of just, filled your life with like supplies, creativity. Hey, you want to paint? Let's get them paint. You want to draw? Let's get them pencils. Let's get them crayons. So how important is the environment was your environment in shaping your approach to creativity?
I think it was so critical for giving me that head start, giving me
Mhm,
an early runway into my creativity, giving me the early like psychological skills. I
mhm.
think somebody who grows up without it, if they're creative, I think the human spirit is, especially the human spirit of a creative person, is going to break through regardless of the environment. But I think it's almost like a privilege conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like I was very privileged to have a environment growing up where both of my parents, possibly undiagnosed ADHD in their own ways, both had kind of creative and artistic backgrounds that they turned into very structured lives. But I think when they had kids, there was this, I mean, they gave us
Like a
like a
shift.
bounty of creative
Yeah.
opportunities. And it was, I think they had a lot of fun seeing what we came up with as
Mhm.
kids. And we as the kids, me and my, 3 siblings, like, we were just crazy makers. We were always doing stuff.
That's cool, man. You know what? I think for many creatives, some of us don't have that example, of like what to do, how to do it, who's doing it. Sometimes we're kind of like, even in our own families, a monolith. So you having that community is like amazing because it's
Yeah.
like many people that I've spoken with, it's kind of like, well, no one in my family did it, or I had an uncle that did it or a cousin that did it, like little things like that. So I think that's cool that the parents are like, hey, everybody's got a little sparkle. Let's feed theirs and see what they come up with.
And
So
it leads to such a judgment-free
I was
place
just
for
about to say that. I was about to be like, so how was that environment knowing that like there were no bad mistakes? Everything just flowed creatively for you. How was that?
I think it was super freeing. Well, and I think too, it wasn't like they also didn't approach it in a way where they were overly praising everything that we came up with. I think
Hmm.
there was like an attitude of bemusement
Hmm.
overall. And like, oh, you guys are so funny that you like are coming up with these things. But I also think that's great because there wasn't like this value, like a sense of like how much
Hmm.
value is attributed to it. Like this is good because it is of high quality that can go in a
Right.
museum. It's good
Right.
because it demonstrates skill at this level. Like we did
Right.
that with other things, but with our, like, art and creative, just feel like the parents were they just thought it was really
Yeah.
fun to see us express
Taking
ourselves, and
yeah,
so we
taking
were
the batteries off.
Yeah, 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 totally.
So just like every creator, I feel like this is the next step into life, school. I think every creator comes to this part of their life. A little bit about me. I almost chose this path of sports medicine. Like I played football my whole life and now here I am an art teacher. So let me ask you about your past. It seems like you have a very fascinating one where you chose a degree in chemical engineering.
That's right, as one does.
As one as one does. So, when you were in these programs, how did that shift from when you were younger doing crafts, lettering, you had this penmanship tag on you, to you transitioning into, "You know what? Let me just throw a whole grenade into everything and let me become a chemical engineer."
Yeah, I think an important part of that story, like, looking at the cultural context, graduating in 2009, we were, I think, like, in the throes of our recession at the time, and so to be a young person who is, like, aware that the economy is not great, there's an anxiety already about what you're gonna do for the rest of your life. Now it's compounded with a sense of, like, you better do something right or you're screwed for a long time. And so well-meaning people, like well-meaning adults in your life are all giving you the conventional wisdom. The phrase that I will never forget, you need to find a profession to support your passion. Like, it's so good. And also it's like, it's not an either or, right? The binary that is implied by that. But it rang very, very clearly to me that like, yeah, starving artist is your one route and something practical and technical is the other route. And then there's a bit of a shout out to my parents too. Like their whole philosophy for us educationally was like they just wanted us to use the years of intentional education to become as well-rounded as possible. So in high school, we did a charter school brick and mortar cyber combo hybrid thing that was very unique to
Okay.
like Pennsylvania at the time. Our teachers there had a particular, I guess, gifting in the liberal arts. So, like my English teacher, who to this day is one of my, I think I would call her friend and an influence in my life. She was also like our drama teacher and then the humanities teachers. I mean, they had a good math and science program, which is how I got the scores I needed to be like, yeah, I can do chemical engineering. But the real emphasis, I think, in that program when I was in it was just like the best English teacher in the world. And the expansiveness and the expressiveness of those disciplines, I think it translated to all of me and my siblings. We just thrived and enjoyed that because, again, I think having the creative upbringing and then getting this chance to express those. So we felt really well trained in those areas. And so my parents, they didn't dictate what I should pursue, but it was kind of heavily implied like, okay, you got your like soft disciplines
Mhm.
down for school. Maybe use your college years to do something that's more rigorous, more
Mm.
in the problem solving realm. So I had that sort of positive reinforcement. I had the negative reinforcement of fear and not really knowing what else was out there. And then some extra fun tidbits where it was just like, I asked myself really like which science I hated the least in high school and tagged the word engineering to the end of it to
Mhm.
figure out what I would do. And I'm like, okay, chemistry and engineering, cool. I guess that's what
Mm.
I'm gonna do. Knowing nothing at the time about, like, specifically the way that that discipline worked, which ends up being so funny because, there are a lot more there are other engineering disciplines that have a lot more crossover in the
Mhm.
visual world, things like architectural engineering or mechanical. You're doing stuff and you're, like, getting to see that there's an artistic sense to it. Chemical engineering has got to be like, just under systems engineering maybe, one of the most theoretical possible ones that you could go with, like, as far
Mhm.
removed from, like, fun, tangible you're doing some chemical experiments, but then it's mostly concerned with the questions of scaling
Yes.
for mass production. So, like, it's cool to go to the lab and say, "Mix this and get this reaction," and then chemical engineering says, "Cool, how do we turn that into a multi-billion dollar industry and do this at scale?" And so you end up doing a lot of math. So you're just drawing math all day. So that was yeah, that's what I ended up doing at Drexel for 5 years.
That's did any part of you during that time just be like, "What am I doing?" Did you ever have that question, spending those late hours in the lab, spending times where you're writing down these formulas and you just look across and you're like, "What am I doing?" Did that moment ever hit you?
I think I had one of those moments, like, every day, literally, that I was doing this program. And then I think at the time too, there was this war in myself of, like, "I shouldn't feel this way." And I don't think that looking back, if I had removed that, I think it would saved me a lot of stress and a lot of mental health. But, yeah, I think what I ended up doing was convincing myself I like to think of it as, like, there were 2 helpful delusions that helped me
Mhm.
get through it. The first was thinking, "Well, you know what? I don't like this. I don't feel called to it, but I haven't even done this halfway yet. Like, this program, it's just started, you know? Let me get to the halfway point. Give it that time, invest in there." And then when I got to the halfway point, the narrative almost immediately switched to, like, I don't like this still, but I'm halfway done. So I might as well just finish it out. If I
Yeah.
can do the first half, I can do the second half. And so
Right.
I just kept going. I didn't even explore the option of switching majors, which is like looking back, I'm like, I don't know why that never occurred to me as something that I could like talk to someone about and try to do. I mean, I think I know why. I was fortunate enough to be on a scholarship for this discipline but I never like talked to my advisor to see, is this tied to the program?
Mm, yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think looking back, the nature of the scholarship would have translated to something else. But I didn't know that and I didn't want to interrogate it. And I was just like within the confines of my 2 delusions, I'm like, I'll get through this. And to be fair, I did.
Yeah. So, looking back at like the different versions of yourself, the engineering student, the uncertain artist, the letter designer that was just kind of pushed away while you did this, what part of your journey shaped you the most?
Think it was that uncertain artist because even though maybe I wasn't activating some grand epiphanies at the time, I was learning how to deal with the uncertainty. And I feel like that is a crucial part of life, and especially the creative life. I think that that has served me well in the years following to just be like, how do you manage uncertainty? Not necessarily to get comfortable with it, because I feel like once you are comfortable, that you're certain in some way. But what do you do with the uncertainty of the future and what is set before you to do and how you're making plans or believing things about yourself? I think being in that like big questioning mode for that amount of time ultimately, I think served me and the later convictions that I have been able to come to and the way that I
Mm.
approach uncertainty in life now.
So, when you speak of uncertainty, do you think that uncertainty could possibly, because I like the word you used, the helpful delusion. Do you think
Yeah,
that uncertainty helped you come to a very clear idea, if that makes sense? Like, did it help you come to that clear final destination of like, hey, engineering is not going to be this final goal. It's going to be something else. Do you think that kind of helped a
yeah.
little bit?
I I almost think it did the opposite,
Oh,
but in a healthy way. I think what it
okay.
did, it helped me to focus on the present more than the distant future and any kind of like anchoring on, well, at
Mhm.
least this will go away, or at least this will be different, right?
Right.
I think it gave me more of the focus of like, I am unable to process if I will be an engineer or an artist, if I am giving this up or not. And it's an overwhelming question. How do I deal with this? I think what I need to do is just focus right now. How do I make the art that I feel called to? Do the program that I also feel called to, and trust maybe that the answer comes through the process of just showing up to do like what feel like competing pulls on my life right now.
Mhm.
How do I move away from the terrifying question of, well, will this serve my like final purpose? And
Mhm.
turn it instead to like, I think I will find my purpose by
Right.
showing up for this right now
Right.
and seeing what happens.
So it sounds like you were dealing with a ton of conflict. I feel like that was a battle. It seems like it was a battle every day for you. And how did that affect you? Like, where did that put you mentally, physically, where it's like, I'm doing what can pay the bills, but my heart is literally tugging me in the opposite direction. So it's just like, what was going through your mind when you have that almost visceral reaction to like, I can't do this anymore? What was
Yeah.
that moment for you?
Gosh, let's see. So, like, I think my mental health in college while I was finishing out the program, it was sort of a roller coaster. And there was a darker period that got pretty intense. What I learned from that was the importance of reaching out to people. It was in the uncertainty spiral, right? I didn't have a clear idea of what was going to happen, but I felt this call to just like write about it and get it out there and tell people and like be as raw and honest as I could. Posted something on a blog that I had back then, shared that to Facebook, just kind of trusting that it was going to help, not really
Mhm.
knowing how, but following the instinct of like, connection seems to be an answer right now rather than going further into myself. And it really did pay off. Like the kind of care that people were almost eager to
Mhm.
jump into and care for me and reach out was nothing like I expected, but it was just a wonderful example to me of like, if you allow people to care for you and
Mhm.
you surround yourself with the kinds of people who would, that can come in and help you in ways that you cannot imagine and you just trust and it'll come back. And then after college, I had sort of the pivotal career moment of applying for my first job in chemical engineering, getting semi far down the initial process. So not even the like the full process, like a
Mhm.
recruiter who's like, I can get you maybe an interview in this first round.
Hey.
So I submitted my resume. It was the clearest lead that I had had a few months after graduation. There was a 24-hour period where he was like, "I'll get back to you." The moment I sent him my stuff and he said that back, kicked off, like,
Man.
one of the most intense psychological and physical 24-hour periods of my
Yeah.
life. Think, like, I had what, if I look back on it, was probably my first panic attack,
Mhm.
not knowing what was going on. Like, why is my body physically responding to this fear or this sensation. Like it was an overwhelming directive almost to be like, this is the end of the road. And to go further, it's just not the way to go. And it wasn't that I was afraid I was going to die or something or that my life was doomed, but
Mhm.
it was like maybe the next best intangible thing where you're just like, I don't know how else to describe it. I just feel like this
Right.
is a clear no, and I need to respond that way, even though it feels safe and it feels like I'm doing the right things. There's clearly something about me that's so much more deeply like, don't do this.
Mhm.
Choose path B that you also don't know and also isn't safe, but is the way that you need to try right now. And so all I
Mm.
needed to do then was to honor that. And so I called this guy back and I mean, he probably had like 50 other young,
Right.
graduates lined up for this job, I think for like Sam Adams Brewery in
Mhm.
Allentown, Pennsylvania. And so he's like, yeah, you're all good. No harm, no foul. But to me, it felt like a monumental decision, like a life changing,
Right.
okay,
Right.
I guess I'm doing graphic design now. Yeah, it was crazy.
So, what did that experience just teach you about listening to yourself and trusting your gut feeling? Because I feel like through that posting of what you're struggling with, not well, posting your story on Facebook and letting people into that kind of very private, sensitive moment that you were going through. But I feel like you always knew and you're kind of looking for that gratification almost a little bit. But I feel like you knew in your gut. So, what did that experience teach you about listening to yourself?
Think it was the first time, or at least the most memorable time, where I realized that that was a voice worth listening to, if that makes sense. Like, without further justification. I think up till that point in life, it was always like, okay, if what I want or what I feel called to is aligned with what someone has told me, who is an authority figure in my life, who is like a well known or well respected person, then I can trust. And for me to hit a point where it's like, I guess there's a part of me that has something worth trusting and something worth believing and something that I grab onto that defines me.
Mhm.
I should listen to that more. I think that has to be the time where it was just the clearest to me, like, this is a category, and it's okay to treat yourself this way, to be like, "Yeah, I will choose for myself against the odds." And I think what it gave me too was, like, it was probably the uncertainty in action for the first time of saying, like, I was so used to taking the uncertainty and being like, "Okay, I don't know what's gonna happen, but this is the right thing to do because it lines up with what
Right.
I heard." This was the first time it's like, I'm uncertain, and this lines up I'm gonna make this action that lines up with what I feel and believe, and still, like, without even though it's untethered to all the conventional wisdom,
Right.
something can still come out of this.
Right. Wow. Man, I wonder how many people are actually going to hear that and be like, you know what, maybe this is a sign for me to personally take that stand, fight that fight, and do what I want. I feel like many people struggle with like heart versus mind. That heart versus mind battle is huge, but I feel like if you know it in your gut and your heart, you should be able to just like what you just said right now, just do it.
Yeah,
Trust, believe in that sound, that inner you, because it's just like it gives you a clearer picture and that relief you feel. That's the thing a lot of people I think search for, but when it's like you're carrying this extra baggage and dragging this heavy stone, just let it go and do what you want and you'll be fine.
right. Well, and I think too, like, even just allowing it to possibly not be fine. That moment of being, it's more important that I take this step in this direction, even if it's not like my life will transform, everything will fall into place. Just the action of listening and being like, it is okay to do this. In fact, it is good to do this
Right.
for the first time. That itself, the action itself, in the moment itself, untethered from the outcome, is so
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah. So let's touch on that. You said you made that decision. You said, okay, I'm going to go forward. How was that first step into graphic design? I mean, you had no formal training. You spent all your glory years of education learning chemical engineering. So, how was that transition of, all right, I'm out of my head. Now I'm about to jump into this. How was that transition for you during that time of going from chemical design tag teaming into.
It's pretty funny thinking back because it was so chaotic. The one thing I realized that was helpful and kind of a hilarious through line was I was still known by people as a graphic designer and an artist because even when I was in college doing all the studies, it was such an obsession for me that I couldn't stop. Like I was infusing everything I could with this. So in some ways, I was just constantly practicing, even though I wouldn't at the time have given myself the title or felt like I could claim like, oh, I am an artist, I am a designer. I was doing like logos for the organizations I was a part of. There is a hilarious anecdote where in the last months of senior year, me and my friends in the program would talk about like all of our professors, like what, because again, MCU, that was the big thing right then with
Mhm.
Marvel. We were like, what if our professors were superheroes? What would each of their superpowers be? And that just entertained us on end.
Yeah.
Like, this is what their superhero name would be. This is like the power
Mhm.
that they would bring. I drew a comic book cover of all of our professors as those heroes. We turned it into a t-shirt campaign. We bought them for our professors. Everyone wore them to like the senior
Mhm.
final luncheon. So I was just in like the art was pouring out of me, whether or
Mhm.
not I was willing to be like, this is my calling.
Mm.
So, in one sense, when I finally made that call to be like, okay, I'm done with engineering, it's all this now, from a practical standpoint of things I was already doing, there wasn't too much of a change. I was still drawing in my sketchbooks. I was posting little art things online. I had some projects here and there. But I think it was me going, okay, I have to take this seriously now and I have to turn this into a career. So, my initial instinct, well, first I went to my parents and I said, I'm so sorry. I am going to ask you for the most like hipster millennial thing, which is to take a gap year and live at home, possibly for free if you'll let me, because I want to give this a shot and like brute force my way into graphic design. And in fact, my first proposal was I will apply to graphic design school and go back. And they both were like, no, don't hold on, dude. Like, that's great, but you don't have to do that, you know?
Mhm.
And it was really helpful for them to tell me, like, first of all, to reiterate, like, yeah, that's cool. You know, if you have a plan, we'll totally support you in looking for this. And for them to also be like, you're good on education, dude. Like
Right.
you did your time.
You did your just due. We believe you.
You got your master's degree. You do not need to spend money you don't have right now, like going in and starting over for that. They were like, find other ways and just like research the industry, see what it looks like. And so that led to me applying for internships instead and also posting online for the first time, like setting up things like my Instagram account and just being like, I think I had this sense of like, we live in a social media world, in an internet world. The technology still feels like it is. I mean, back then it felt like it was helpful. You know what I mean? Which is such a sad thing to say in 2026. I digress. Back then, it was like, wow, this is a great tool for possibly carving something out and finding my own path. I need to just do whatever I can that I can think of opportunities if I play the field. And actually, that's kind of in some ways, as I reflect on it, like there's a bit of a chemical engineering influence in that because one theory that really stuck with me from studying chemical engineering is like collision theory, where the chemical reactions that occur for the universe are there's an increased probability of them when you shrink the volume or you add particles. So it's almost like things bouncing around. If there are enough of them bouncing around, then there's enough chance that they'll hit each other. And when they hit each other, the kinetic energy transfer, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, the more you do stuff, the higher chance stuff will happen. So it's that for me, it was like, let me just go and do things. I think I just need to do things and trust that by relentlessly doing things, I'm increasing the number of particles in the space. I'm shrinking the volume down and making sure that my odds of something good happening are going to get better.
So let's touch on the Instagram part. The name. Where did that come from? How did that start? Everybody has a fun, and some people use their name. Yours is very creative. So let's talk about it. Where did that come from?
Man. Yeah, so DanDrawnWords, it started as a hashtag on my personal Instagram, between pictures of food and selfies and stuff, like a good millennial. There is a series of murals in Philadelphia. I think it's called like Love Letters. The artist Steve Espo Powers, I think a New York City based guy, he did a series of like lettering based murals that were just visible when you're on the subway going into, I think the east part of town. And I had a co-op as part of my program in Drexel that had me taking that every day for a while. So I was exposed to this and I was so inspired by it. So when I graduated, when I'm on this little journey now of like, okay, spray and pray. What do I do? Just do as much as I can. I remembered those murals. I remembered being like the little printer. I was like, I even used to print out different fonts from Microsoft Word as like a third grader and then copy them to like make my own logos and stuff. So nerdy.
Right.
If I had known that was like, oh, that's graphic design. But I was like, I've always loved the opportunities with words and turning them into fun, like word art. So I was like, let me do a project where I get the little sketchbook and every spread, I'm going to make some kind of like word poster. And then because I'm doing it by hand, but my name is Dan, it's like hand drawn, Dan drawn. And then from there, the Dan drawn words. I guess something about the meter felt nice. So I would
Got
hashtag
it.
them all. DanDrawnWords. And then, yeah, I had a friend who I still don't, to this day, I don't know why she suggested this, but I'm glad she did. She was like, it's kind of cool that you post all these like lettering things, but it's kind of like getting in the way of us seeing what's going on in your like normal life. So maybe you should do a different account that's just for the artwork.
Right.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. Like, why not? So I kicked off Dan Drawn Words in, gosh, it's got to be like early 2015. And so 11 years later, still kicking.
When did you know, like, when did you realize or did you know that the account would become something much bigger?
I didn't. I think it was just like, I loved just dropping things in there for fun, turning it into the little passion project of like, oh, there's an endless, brief here of ways that you can draw words and anything I wanted to draw. And I can keep this going forever. This is amazing. So making it my sandbox, honestly, I mean, that was the mentality that kept me going with it. Maybe to your point though, about like it gaining traction, uh, like in 2016, 2017, there were still the concept of aggregate accounts that would pick up some design and platform it, broadcast it, because they would have like hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
followers. And then you could reliably see an influx of people who are interested in following you. Because again, back then, the feed was like people you followed.
Followed.
You
Yep.
didn't have they maybe had very limited ads, and so there was an incentive for people to be like, "Oh, yeah, I will follow this," instead of now when it's kinda like, "Oh, if I like this, they'll show up again, so I don't need
Mhm.
to vote with my follow or anything." But at the time, for something to be picked up by one of these aggregate accounts, like Good Type or The Daily Type, or they all had, like, type in their names.
Yeah.
That was a huge you would see an influx of other designers, other people who are interested in the community come in and follow you, and then they would like your stuff and comment, and you'd start, like, feeling part of something, and I think when I got picked up by, like, the first 2 or 3 of those, it started to make me think, "Oh, okay, this has legs in the world, in the greater community of artists and designers. There's something about my style that is resonating with people," and that was really
So what was it like discovering that world? Because it's like back then it was easy to find like, well, if you're into photography, I can follow this guy and they follow all these photographers. Okay, I like tattooing. I'm gonna find me a tattooer. Oh, they follow. So what was it discovering this wide world of like typographers and lettering and font design and all this stuff? What was that for you?
I'm gonna answer your question in a second, but you reminding me that that's the way it used to be just made
It
my
used to
heart
be that.
hurt so much.
I'm a millennial too. When I
Yeah,
first got it, I was like, "Who do I follow?" I was like, "Okay, I'm
that was
following friends. I'm following this." I'm like,
we
and
didn't
then
know how
one of
good
my
we had it.
no, and one of my buddies was like, "Yo, go follow this photographer. Yo, go follow this graffiti guy. Yo, go follow this." And this is when you could actually like comment and they would comment back. It
Yeah.
wasn't a robot. You'd be like, "Hey, man, love that." They'll be like, "Appreciate you. Thanks for liking it." And you'd be like, "I exist." Like that was before you, dude. I know.
Uh,
We're washed. We're
what
washed.
a high. We need
Technology.
to bring that back somehow.
Yeah, but
Uh,
that's how I looked at it because it's just like once you found one, you're like, "Who are they following?
yeah, right.
My gosh, I didn't know who's that? Oh my god, look at that." It was before they suggested, it was before everything else. It was literally like what we were talking about earlier. It was like a tool for creatives at one point because you could
Right.
find that community so quick. You find one person, boom, here's 10 people off the rip, and that 10 people took you to 25. That took you almost, and then you started building a following, and it was just before the bots and AI got in, it was
Yep.
genuine connection because people would message you like, "Hey, love your work. Hey, I saw your art here. Hey, I didn't know you made that." Like,
Right. And I think critically too, like nowadays, the extent to which that is true, it's almost like it only gives you who the platform thinks has already made it. Like, okay, these are like the people, and you go and like they got 200,000 followers already. That's cool. What had back then was more like ways to connect with the people who were
Mhm.
building, who were like
Right.
at your level, and yeah, who were like passionate about the same things and willing to engage each other and weren't all, like, being burnt out, being forced to make reels of everything
Right.
about their craft. So, anyway, roundabout
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got off topic. I love how we both just sat here and looked at each other too like, "Okay, back to it. Okay, we're
flashbacks. But I think, like, along those lines, though, like, the way that it made me feel in discovering that world, like, it was potent, like, it was a powerful emotional thing for me. First of all, it was really encouraging. 'Cause like, validation from your peers, like, as crass as we might like to think that it is, it's so critical as a creative person to achieve that, and not just in a way that's like, "Cool stuff, bro," but in a way where you hear somebody speak your language and share your passion about something and, like, give you genuine feedback about how that made them feel or, like, the things they were trying to figure out, and you have conversations that feel real about all of those things. It's that somebody made a quote that's like, "Friends are made when you're like, oh, you too? I thought I was the only one."
right."
And for me, being like siloed as like I'm the art kid who's figuring things out, like I didn't have the longest time like a community. I mean, I think it's proven by not having someone who is like graphic design is a viable career option for you if you want to pursue it, right? I was it was there's something fun about being the art kid or the designer kid in when all your peers are not, and so you're like, "Yeah, that's kind of my thing." But then to discover like, "Oh, shoot, it is really cool to be the designer kid in a room of designer kids," you know? Or to the first time I went to Creative South, the conference in 2016, I remember I was journaling about it on the plane back, and I was just moved to tears in the plane, like, reflecting on what it felt like to be introduced now to this world of people who all had this kind of same passion, same struggles, an immense amount of skill that it was just so fun to celebrate with them, to struggle with them, and then to really just speak the same language. And so I kind of have been chasing that high ever since and finding myself like on this side of my career, like about 10 years or so in, the joy of being a catalyst of that for other people too. Being like, "Oh, I can give back. I can contribute to this feeling for people." It's wonderful.
That's dope, man. Now the $1,000,000 question is, why lettering? Out of all the art forms, did the little printer stay stuck there, or was it like, "Hey, you know what? Let me challenge myself a little bit more. Let me lean into kerning and all these other difficult terms." Like, what was it for you? Because my first introduction to lettering and type was graffiti. That's where my
Mm.
background started. So that's where I fell in love with this. So I'm curious to know, what was it about lettering specifically that resonated more with you than any other art form?
Dude, that's such a good question because I also don't know if I'd ever sat and been like, "Oh, yeah, this is the one." But I think my body of work has proven that it
It
continues to be
is.
the
It
one.
is. Yeah.
I think, honestly, well, it's the fact that it encompasses like, lettering in my mind is like a subset of just word art in general. The fact that this discipline encompasses everything from creating a typable font to calligraphy disciplines that have been around forever to, like you're saying, graffiti, there is a variety of how this gets expressed that is almost never ending. And that kind of endless possibilities nature, I think that's true of any art, but it's like easier to see for me
Mhm,
with word art because it's these we're taking like some of the most recognizable and most critical aspects of life, visual
mhm,
elements of day-to-day life, and saying, how do I turn this into an art form? What are the ways that I can transform this? And the answer to that literally has endless
mhm,
variations to it. And
mhm.
I think it's like, as a kid, wanting to never be bored, finding ways to never be bored, that continues now. Like, lettering is never boring to me because 'cause I'm just like, if I start getting bored, well, then let me go pursue a style that I haven't given a shot for a while, or, all these different ways of exercising it and the way modalities in which it can be applied. I think it's that, just the
Mhm.
endlessness of it is easier for me to access, and then it helps me to think about all the other design work and other artwork where it's easy sometimes to be like, "Oh, it's" like, it narrows over time, especially
Right.
as you start maybe specializing in a style or something, and then lettering always breaks me out of that because it reminds
Mm.
me there's so many more ways to do this.
So you said a few things that I kind of want to touch on. I feel like where you said it helps break you out, like it breaks up these regular forms of art, but you also said it makes you look at text and words again. And it's something else you've mentioned about how lettering as a way as making people look towards words again. It's almost like that storytelling aspect of it. So how does lettering transform something ordinary like a word into something meaningful?
I think it reminds people of the depth of everyday things, if that makes sense. One of my favorite quotes that I think I've mentioned before, paraphrasing G.K. Chesterton, when he was talking about fairy tales, he's like, "In fairy tales, we make rivers run with wine so that we can remind ourselves for a moment that they run with water." And that whole notion of like, life is full of wonder, things that should make us stop and just be amazed at all of the beauty and all of the stuff that we've given definitions to and explanations for. And it's really helpful to have done that, but the temptation that we run into is to forget how wonderful or magical or powerful these everyday things are. And words definitely fall into that. Any kind of motto or mantra, song lyrics, anything becomes familiar, it starts losing the magic that maybe it once compelled us with, or the people who wrote it. The Declaration of Independence, something about that was so monumental. And if you are forced to just like study it or memorize it, it's easy to forget why these things mattered. And so with lettering, I think it gives an opportunity to rearrange words, to pull out like thematic elements and turn them into visual elements, and invite people when they're reading it and looking at it to consider the layers of what is being said and the words that they're maybe super familiar with. You're putting a new lens on. You're seeing like, oh wow, this looks like a river of wine. And then you're like, wait, no, this is the old song that I used to love.
Mhm,
Like I never really thought of it that way. And I think the I never really thought of it that way before of the practice is what keeps
mhm.
me going to it. There's something about coming up with my own stuff and ways to present it that's fun, but one of my favorite things is taking an old saying or a quote and then breathing new life into it and feeling like
Mm.
I've made something that's like kind of new, but only because it's rooted in like the foundations of what this thing was trying to say.
So when you're creating something new and meaningful, what does that moment feel like internally?
A good question. I think what's funny is there are times when it is super mundane and it's not like you're on fire from point A to point
Yeah.
B or A to Z, like completing it. I think what tends to happen is like point A, see the quote, have an idea, get inspired. There's that initial fire, like, oh, dude, this could be so cool. Or like, "Oh, I can make like pull meaning out of this. This would be really fun." And then there's the process. I think it's just like, okay, I'm going to make this happen. And then the flow state, if you're lucky, of just getting into it and like the minutia of all the decisions that you make to get it to the final point. But there's almost like a necessary distance from that initial inspiration. Because if you relied on like just being motivated by the passion of the idea
Yeah, yeah.
and you're in the middle of like kerning the thing
Mhm.
or like going a direction that doesn't work, having to fix it, doing all the technical things required of any craft. I think it's important to remember, like, we will not be feeling the same way throughout the process of anything, and it's important to incorporate that into the experience or the expectation of something that you think is meaningful, because then I think you get to Z, you're doing the finishing touches, and it's like, I allow myself to feel that feeling again because the thing is complete. I'm like, "Okay, is this doing what I thought it was supposed to do?" Sometimes it's, like, twice as good as the initial idea. I'm like, "Shoot, yeah, this is" I'm so, like, glad that it went through the journey of the mundane that it did, and now I'm really proud of this, like, more so. Sometimes there's, like, a sense of wonder
Yeah.
too. "I did that? Oh, that's cool." I could like, I know I did that, but I did
Right, right. No, I think every artist goes through it, especially when you see it out of your studio,
man.
and it's out, like, either in public, on show, or in someone's collection. You're just looking at it like,
Yeah, that's what it was gonna
yeah. And
yeah.
then sometimes it's fun when you get to stand back and watch other people observe it, just to see their natural, visceral reaction. Some, it's I forgot the artist. He was like, I forgot the fine artist that said it. I have to remember it. It'll come back to me. But it's my favorite quote. He says, "I make art to mess up your day. It's either to make you feel good, make you feel bad, make you feel indifferent." He was like, "If I've made you think any little bit about my art, I've done my job." And I was like,
Dude,
fire. I love that idea. So that's why I was like, that's just such a good place to be when you can see it and watching other people experience it.
it speaks to the storytelling, the communicative
Yes.
aspect of what we're
Yes.
doing, right? Like, we're not most of us, I think, we don't feel that we're supposed to be making this in a void for no
Mhm.
one else to look at and experience. Like, we crave the connection that it creates. Like,
Mhm.
exactly what that quote was. Like, I want it to change you. I want it to interfere with your timeline because then
Right.
that means that we've somehow made a connection, and it gives me the meaning of having done something that's, like, from my soul.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. I think that's beautiful. So let's talk about leaving a mark in the real world. One thing I love about your story is that your work literally lives in a physical world through murals, signage, and everywhere, you know? So, what does it feel like to walk through a town to see pieces of your artwork? Nervous. It seems nervous.
Dude, it's surreal, and it's also funny how quickly it becomes normal when it shouldn't, you know? Because in so many ways, that's what the little printer, me printing out fonts, making fake logos in Trebuchet MS, like, disciplined sketching, was hoping for, was to be like, "I'm creating tangible assets, I'm making a mark on the world." When I take in the scope and the scale of even a few of those projects, of seeing
Mhm,
stuff that's out there, I am filled with so much gratitude,
mhm,
honestly, for the opportunity to be like, I've made a mark, I've made it a difference. This is a thing that I have done tangibly, that I like. There's no mistaking whether or not I did something. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, even if it
Right.
were to go away, there's like a physical record of having
Been there.
affected the
Yeah.
world, affected your community. And so I think it's like building up that roster mentally of those kinds of projects. It's kind of helpful when like the negative health head talk comes in because you can hold it up against tangible realities and actual projects that you've done. And sometimes walk downtown and see it and be like, look, see, you did this.
So, do you think sometimes creatives underestimate the value of making work for real communities instead of chasing that internet attention, like we were talking about? It's just like there was a time where you could post something and get genuine feedback, and now people are posting it to be like, I didn't get enough likes or numbers. Okay, I have to archive it until I can get it back and repost it. So, do you think creatives underestimate that?
Think so. And maybe, yeah, I think it's like an underestimation of the benefits that it brings to you too. Like all the things that I just mentioned, like to do things out of service for people. It also like forward, like you're going through a similar process. You're learning things about the craft, you're building connections, and you're seeing how it can be meaningfully applied in real life scenarios. So yeah, I think it's so easy to lose sight of that if it becomes a numbers game or wanting to be an influencer. But if you're passionate about the craft, especially of design, which is by nature about business needs, community needs, human needs, then you're gonna want to practice that as many times as you can. And the opportunities in your community, in your physical community, are probably so much greater than a lot of.
So, what do you think the real cost of choosing a creative life is?
I think it is the cost of choosing uncertainty over certainty. I think it goes back to the uncertainty conversation that we were having, because creativity by definition requires originality and innovation and imagination, and that requires the courage of breaking out of things that are already established. And all of that requires trusting that even though you're not sure of an outcome, that you need to take those steps into uncertainty, explore and trust your skills and your gut, and make something happen, and just like let the passion guide you. But all of that, that's a cost, because you can't say like, I know this is how it's going to pan out. You're saying,
That's the scary part,
yeah, I'm surrendering the absolute, yeah, 1 + 1 = 2 of this, and saying,
right?
what if I tried door 3 when I thought there were only 2 doors?
Right. Yeah. I feel like a lot of us as creatives, we in our earlier years, we rush to find or build door 3 instead of allowing ourselves to just work through
Right.
the processes and the gut feelings, cloudy days, the rainy days, the days where you're laying there questioning everything. And it's kind of like allow yourself to just the one thing, the practice, being present. I feel like a lot of us
Oh, yeah.
find that older. I don't want to say older, as my kids call me Unc, but I feel like, yeah, I'm Unc status. So it's like, I feel like we find out about that sense of just being present and slowing down later on because it's like if we would have had this earlier, we probably would have done something different. I don't know. We might have been on a different path, but yeah, I agree with you on that. So here's an interesting thing I like to throw in the mix before we conclude is the lightning round. So you're going to give me your answer. You choose, and you can give an explanation, or we can just be like this or that, and you can be like that, this or that. I've only stumped one person so far, and I'm kind of proud of that. So one person was like, I don't know. So
That says more about them than you.
all right, so here we go. Pen or iPad?
Pen or iPad?
Yeah.
iPad.
Sketchbook or Procreate?
Oh, that's contextual. Highly contextual. Yeah. Procreate for the speed of things that need to get done. Sketchpad for the craft building.
Okay. Favorite book for creatives?
The Art of Possibility by Rosamund Zander and her husband, whose name I forget. It is
Okay.
a husband and wife couple. Husband and wife couple. That was redundant. The Art of Possibility.
Okay.
Incredible.
Okay. Favorite place you've ever seen typography in the world?
Mm, that's really hard. I kind of want to say I took a trip to Guatemala last year and just like sign painted stuff there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah,
rad.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. When I saw that question, I was like, dude, my first place, and it's not even there anymore, being a graffiti kid, my favorite place I've ever seen. I don't think it's typography, but it was the LA River. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the Sabre LA River piece. He hopped over a fence, painted this beautiful masterpiece with house paint. And it was huge. It was like the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest graffiti piece
I'll look this
painted.
up.
Yeah, Sabre LA River piece. It was huge, and he took a picture of himself across from it, and he looks like a dust speck on there. And I was like, that
Bro.
is the LA River piece by Sabre will always go down to me as one of the GOAT pieces I've ever seen.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, I also got to shout out the murals in Philly. The Investo Powers, that series. Yeah,
All
forever.
right. So now we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, AI
Dun, dun,
and the
dun, dun, dun.
future of creativity. So we both have been in it. We've seen the growth of it. We've seen how it's coming and moving. But so we're in this place now where AI can generate images, illustrations, and even lettering styles. Do you think tools like AI threatens the craft, or do you think it can actually highlight human crafts, the human craft?
I think both, honestly. I think there's an argument to be made for every technology that leads, like, that was created with the idea of easing the human experience has a bit of both effects, right? Because before there was a struggle involved, for better or worse, in solving problems. And what people learn from those struggles had and has a place in turning us into, like, useful communicators, more empathetic human beings, and I think that there are times when that is also an extraneous struggle that you should try to remove, but I don't think that the struggle of artistic craft is one of those struggles that you should try to remove from the human experience, and I fear that a lot of the AI, like, its impact on art is to remove that struggle and give people this shortcut to the wonder of seeing your vision realized. You know, we can argue about the merits of how technically good those outcomes are, and I do think, like, over time, they're gonna continue to have higher and higher fidelity to things that we would call good art or good technical representations, but inherently, by stripping away the human process of it, it's not it's not removing something that was bad for us,
Mhm.
and I think the opposite might actually be true.
So let's talk about what's your feeling actually? What is your feeling on how fast it comes up with something? Like, what is your feeling on that? Because it's like you said something really interesting about convenience being the
Yeah.
enemy of meaningful creativity. So do you think the best work is often slow, or do you think it's often that convenient AI quick, McDonald's cheeseburger versus a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a 7-hour steak cooked, which is like that's the way I kinda look at it. So, what do you think the best creative work is often?
Well, I the metaphor that you just used, or the analogy, I think is so critical, is so spot on for how to think about it. Like, junk food, we're, familiar with the term, or with the category, where you're like, "Yeah, this hits all my pleasure centers right now. Maybe I'm hungry, maybe I'm just craving something. I'm gonna take this thing that's engineered to be rapid, familiar, make me
Right.
feel good." And I know for a fact that I am paying the price in some other ways for these cheap calories, this extraneous sugar, but it gave me kind of the dopamine high. I
Yep.
think for that reason, the instantaneous nature of AI, like, there's a danger there in getting what is convenient for you. I mean, I think we can look at that with addictive substances as well, because physically and psychologically, it does simulate, like, intense pleasure, but the costs are always, proportionate to how quickly we have achieved this sensation.
Mhm.
And so I think for that reason, like, if we treat art that way, we're reducing the process of craft, just craft in general, to an experience of point A to point B wonder. We're getting the dopamine hit of something to nothing. There's so much that is, like, it's a legitimately wonderful, like, wondrous thing. It's a
Mhm.
magic trick, right?
Right.
But it's not, like, there's something unhealthy, I think, about that, because it's also just reducing the calories of art
Right.
into experience of seeing something that seems to fit. And I think it's also it goes to the question of, like, what's the point of art
Right.
and making? What's the point of this craft? Is it to have something that looks nice? And I think, like, to bring capitalism into it, like, the so much of why it has proliferated is because people have needed faster and faster means of just getting visual approximations of assets to convince people to make buying decisions. Like,
Mm.
that is the whole engine behind why this works. Because you can sort of track that to, like, the rise of stock imagery, right?
Mhm.
That exists solely because creatives, or the creative craft of photography, videography, it needed to be co-opted or like turned into something that was a commodity, something that could allow people to make like a designer to make a rapid decision to get
Hmm.
like someone else to sign off on a campaign and all these things.
Right.
And so we're seeing in a lot of ways like this is the platonic ideal of the commodified visual asset, which strips craft of its process and the
Hmm.
meaning of process, and it becomes just about an outcome to say,
Hmm.
well, if I had a really nice picture of a person who looked exactly like my target demographic doing this thing that makes my customer feel exactly like they want to pull the trigger and
Yeah.
buy my, skin cream,
Hmm.
and that's the whole point of this.
Hmm.
And to reduce all of the human struggle and, like, back and forth and the things we learn and the ways we empathize and, like, being forced to communicate and ending up with something that's resonant with people at a deeper level,
Hmm.
that's a trade-off that we make when we say, "Hey, it's just about the fact that I can call this a style, plug it in a prompt, get it in 2 seconds, and not, like, really worry about it much more than that."
So how do you keep your creativity and your like social media intact with all this AI and them throwing algorithm stuff at you? Some of the stuff you can look at, literally look at and be like, that no one drew that. That is definitely AI. So how do you
Yeah.
keep your creativity intact when you're just when you are bombarded with just maybe someone copying your stuff, maybe you can tell someone took your style and dropped it into chat. So how do you manage that for Dan?
I think it well, I'm gonna take a tangent that'll bring us back to this.
Okay.
Alyssa Liu, the gold medal freestyle skater,
Yeah.
she came out, did this incredible performance at the Olympics, I think, like, well-deserved gold medal. She was asked a lot about her process and her mindset through the whole thing, and one of the things that has stuck with me the most because it just I feel like it resonated so much with things I was sort of thinking, but she articulated really well. They were asking her things like, "Are you nervous? What are you hoping for as far as the medals?" And she was pretty much like, "That's not really the point. To have enjoyed my craft, to have enjoyed my process, to have enjoyed the feeling of being alive that the struggle gives me, that is what I'm here to celebrate, and that's what I'm here for." And then you watch her performance and you see so much of this relaxed energy, this sensation of somebody who is dialed in and has clearly
Mhm.
poured her life into this craft and this performance and is performing at the top level while
Mhm.
exuding incredible joy in just being able to express what she's capable of. And so I think for me, if I anchor my practice on that kind of an outcome where it's like that feeling of the flow state, that feeling from A to Z of getting inspiration, seeing something, the wonder, if all of those are what drive me, then truly there's nothing about this competitive illusion of social media that can come and take that away. Because if I love it and I'm not waiting for you to prove that you love it too
Yeah.
with 100,000 likes and going viral on it, then, I've won to the extent that there is a winning or losing here.
Mhm.
And I just feel like I've approached DanDrawnWords from the get-go with that mentality of like, this is
Mhm.
not a competition. This is not me trying to hop on trends in any way. This has always been about, I just freaking love the opportunities to take words and turn them into something. And you will see me doing that on my own schedule, my own time, breaking rules, making up fake ones, coming up
Mhm.
with theories that have
Yeah, yeah.
parameters and then like ending those arbitrarily and just being like, I think it was an early instinct that I'm grateful to have listened to because it has helped to inform the rest of my design career of I need an outlet to always be doing this for joy. And that
Mm.
means like on my own terms, maybe incorporating things that I know are good for the world or trends or things that I want to try just because they look fun or could be useful in other ways. But if I ever feel obligated to do this, I'm going to stop. And
Mhm.
so I've kept going because it's just continued to be fun and a joy. And I think as creatives, things have to come from there. If they stop coming from there, then we fall down the trap of like commodifying our own product. And then our service gets worse and our inner creative soul starts to
Yep.
deteriorate.
Yep.
So, yeah, I feel like Did I
No.
ever bring it back
Yep.
to the
Yep.
question?
Yep. You sure did. So these last two questions, Dan, I just want to give you a little bit of space to reflect on. If creativity disappeared from your life tomorrow, what part of yourself do you think you would miss the most?
I do think on one level, it's an impossible question to answer because if it were gone, then my imagination would be gone and I couldn't miss anything. And I'd be like, this is all I'm here for. But I think, like, to answer the question exactly, though, what would an aspect of my life that I love and would hate to lose, I think is the comfort of dreaming. Like, as much as I talk about the fear and the uncertainty and getting familiar with it, I do think that I'm often propelled, and I think a lot of artists are, by the there's almost like a warm blanket feeling when you imagine what the world could be or the things that your work could do for you, or just such a good idea that it transcends even yourself. You're just like, yo, that'd be so dope. And to lose that, I think would be devastating. Yeah, it's like there are useful delusions in life. And I think those are one of them. Anything creative, any entrepreneurial endeavor requires you believing that something's going to work long before you have any evidence that it does or can. And to learn anything or get better at anything, you also have to keep putting yourself out there and doing things before you know you're going to succeed in them. And it
Absolutely.
requires, while on the one hand, it requires you to be like, okay, let me have a category for the uncertainty of this. There's also that comfort of the feeling like, what if, what if
Hmm.
things went right?
Yeah.
What if this was the coolest project I've ever done? And there's so much that's motivating about that. It's not the whole fuel, but it's, part of the meal.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, if someone's listening right now and they feel stuck between that safe path and that creative path, what would you want them to hear from you?
Oh, dude. I would want them to hear, don't forecast it out too far. You will, and trust your gut. Don't try to imagine what taking this next step is going to do for you in a year. Just look at what the parameters are right now and what your gut is telling you. Incorporate all of that and just take the next steps. That's probably what I'd want to say. Don't feel like what you're about to do is going to shut you off from any path in the future. There are so many ways to everything out there. And if you start locking down, that's when you start losing hope. That's when you start losing the dream. So
Well, Dan, thank you so much for being on my podcast. Where can the people find you and check out your stuff?
the aforementioned DanDrawnWords on Instagram is where I spend most of my days. DestinyKid.com is my website. That's the sandbox of my creative practice and some portfolio things. So between those two, that's usually where I'm hanging out.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching the podcast today. My name is Justin Robinson, the talented, the career shifter, going from chemist to fine artist to designer and everything in between, the great Dan Lee. And this is the Art School graduate. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.